Hi everyone, good afternoon from the Dole Institute of Politics. My name is Cass Casmus, and I'm a senior here at KU majoring in philosophy. I'm also a student assistant at the Dole Institute of Politics and an active member of the Student Advisory Board. Thank you for joining us for today's program, presented in partnership with the KU Career Center. Over the next hour, we'll be hearing from 3 panelists working in Topeka about their career experiences, insights, and advice for KU students interested in similar fields or working in the state capitol. I'm happy to be joined by Matt Giano from the KU Career Center. Matt, I'll turn it over to you for a few words before we introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Cass. Like Cass mentioned, my name is Matt Giuliano. I'm a career advisor at the University Career Center. I specialize with our education and public service student pathway, where I advise students, helping them navigate and plan looking for education and public service careers.
All right, thank you. Now let's go over how tonight's discussion will flow. So he and I will take turns asking our 3 panelists their questions. To keep things organized, they're going to respond in the following order. First, it'll be Catherine, then Grace, and then Adam. For those joining us virtually, feel free to send your questions to dolequestions@ku.edu, and we'll do our best to address them. After the program, we'll have some time for the audience to ask questions. If you do have a question, please raise your hand, and one of our student workers will come around with a microphone. And please stand if you're able and ask just one brief question. Now we can begin with our introductions. So for our panelists, could each of you share a bit about yourself? Specifically, what did you study as an undergraduate at KU? How are you involved in the Student Advisory Board? And what has your career path looked like since you graduated?
Great. Well, thanks, everyone. Okay, cool. Thanks, Cass. Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate you inviting us. My name is Catherine Magana. I am currently a legislative policy analyst and liaison for the Kansas Department of Transportation. And I actually was pretty involved with the Dole Institute of Politics and the SAB during my time in undergrad at KU, where I studied political science. While I was at KU and involved with the SAB, I was first a discussion group coordinator, and then I was later SAB coordinator, and found it to be just very helpful in kind of helping me figure out what I wanted to do. So happy to be here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Hoge. I serve as Governor Laura Kelly's press secretary. While I was at KU, I studied political science, and I minored in women's gender and sexuality studies. Really excited to be here today in my personal capacity. And I actually was not involved in the Student Advisory Board or the Dole Institute while I was here, which is one of my big regrets because I changed my major at the last minute. I thought I was going to study nursing and did a 180. So really excited to be here with you all today.
Hi everyone, I'm Adam Steinhilber, and I am an Assistant Solicitor General in the Office of the Kansas Attorney General. Also here in my personal capacity. At KU, I majored in political science, and at the Dole Institute of Politics, I was just an SAB member at first, and then I eventually became the event student assistant here. And then after KU, I went to law school and earned my law degree from the University of Michigan School of Law.
Thank y'all so much. So we kind of recognize starting out in a new career can be overwhelming, and it's helpful to hear how you overcame those early challenges. So how did you navigate the transition from college to the professional world?
So I was lucky enough to be able to start my current position a few months after I graduated from KU, which I know not everyone has that option, but for me it gave me a lot of time to, I think, just kind of adjust, finish up undergrad and then just move into kind of a new path. But I think ways that I was able to maybe better adjust was just really working to get myself in a routine in preparation of that job, and just kind of mapping out, this is what my commute is going to look like. This is, how much time I'm going to have when I get home every day, and just kind of setting myself up for that. And I'm not an early riser, so now I am.
I would say I really utilized my support network. I did several internships throughout undergrad, and I think that they were super beneficial as far as connecting me with mentors and other peers who graduated, a couple years before me. And so really relying on them and getting insight from them. Similar to Catherine, I was also very lucky to have a really seamless transition. I actually accepted an internship in Washington, D.C. at the White House right after I graduated, and so I was able to live there for 3 months and do that, and then again was offered to come back and kind of had a seamless transition there. But I really credit a lot of that to the network that of professionals that I worked with throughout my time doing internships.
In terms of the transition to employment, I think one of the most helpful things for me was just understanding my competencies that I had as an undergraduate, as a law student, and then how I can transition into using those to be, an exceptional employee. Understanding, that what works for you now is probably going to work for you within reason at an actual job. So if you know that you are a morning person, get into work early, get started on your work early. That's something that helps me a lot. If you are someone who likes to write things down a lot, then understand that in your office you might want to ask, hey, can I bring in a whiteboard or have a lot of notepads so that I can jot down ideas? So I think understanding that you are generally successful now, there's a reason you're at KU, you're a part of SAB, you're probably smart, competent, hardworking, and understanding that yes, although that there is going to be a gap in transition to wherever you go after undergrad, a lot of the skills and traits that you already have are going to serve you really well there. You just have to learn how to retool them a bit into your new role.
Thank you all for sharing that. Can I ask, when did you start looking for jobs in your senior year of college?
So mine was not necessarily a formal job search. My senior year at KU, I was studying for the LSAT, taking that a couple of times, and about halfway through my senior year, I decided that, I think I just want to give more time to law school admissions and, maybe just take a year in between. And, in that year, I want to, do a job that I think is interesting or, just work a little, save some money before I move on to, post-secondary education. And in that time, I think it was maybe February or March, I ended up not even, wasn't really looking for a job. Honestly, was prepared to move back to Wichita and live with my parents again, and no shame in that. And I came across this job posting that a friend sent me and said, this seems like a cool thing. And I know that that's very much not the typical case in a job search, but I applied and just, didn't think a lot of it. But then when it became more real to me, I started getting serious and thinking that it would be something I was interested in, which was a job that I didn't even really know existed when I applied for it. And I feel like that's oftentimes the case with careers in public service. So I just encourage you to maybe not feel so set in the path that you're in and just, feel like you have latitude to change course sometimes.
I would say I started looking, I was on the governor's second campaign in 2022, which obviously ended with the election in November, and I started looking right after that. The internship that I ended up doing in Washington, D.C., I applied for in December, but I would say around winter break was when I really started formally looking for jobs and just kind of browsing a wide variety of things. I knew I was most interested in political communications, but I was also looking at jobs, in different sectors as far as like public service, nonprofit organizations, things like that. So not necessarily working for one specific individual, but really started to hone in on that probably in January or February. And I was offered a position that I actually delayed accepting until August when I returned from DC. That was offered to me in April. So that was a pretty seamless transition there.
I'm going to be honest, this is kind of where I don't have much advice because I went to law school straight out of undergrad, and I kind of always knew that I was going to do that. So I made that decision in the fall of my last year at KU, and then that kind of took me through LSAT prep, taking the LSAT, applying that fall, that spring, making a decision. So I don't really have too much advice in terms of applying out of undergrad, but I will say that that process can be very flexible, and you should feel free to explore a lot of options. Like I had a lot of friends who went to work right out of undergrad, and a lot of them didn't really find positions until their last semester of their senior year, and a lot of that was just trying to figure out what exactly is out there. There are a lot of new jobs that are created that maybe they never thought about pursuing when they went into KU and decided they're going to major in journalism. They didn't know they were going to go and work in, for example, sales on Capitol Hill, selling subscriptions to members of Congress. But that's pretty cool. And so when you're looking at postgraduate jobs, I just recommend that you try and be very flexible and think outside of the box to the extent you can.
So a little bit of a burning question, especially as a career advisor at the University Career Center. So when you were going through your job or graduate school search, did you use the Career Center as a resource?
So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I didn't technically go to the Career Center for resources, but I did attend a Careers in Public Service event in my undergrad, which I actually I don't know that I can link it directly to the position I'm in, but it certainly helped broaden my horizons. And I think that one was maybe a little bit more specific to careers in DC, but I think it really helped me, think outside the box, like Adam said, a little bit more in terms of, oh, these are positions that, I'm looking at the career paths of these people in front of me, and that's interesting to me. And so, if I wanted to do something like them, how would I kind of emulate that, or try to follow that path, and hopefully find something that is my niche or that I'm interested in. So I think in terms of that, the Career Center in a way did help me kind of just gain some exposure to careers that could be options and that kind of piqued my interest.
Similar to you, Catherine, I kind of browsed, but not to sound like a broken record, I think networking was the most beneficial thing for me. Through my internships, I made connections with people, my peers, my mentors, my supervisors, and that really was what connected me to get to me to where I am now.
So I never went through the Career Center itself, but during the process of looking at law schools, I did talk with the pre-law advisor a little bit at KU, and also went to the law school admissions fair that the university held, which was very helpful. And then also just kind of generally think about what I wanted to do after undergrad. It was very helpful for me to talk with people who I interacted with daily, and get their advice on their careers. Like, for example, there was a time I thought about majoring or getting a master's degree in museum studies and, being an archivist. And so I talked with Audrey Coleman, who's now the director here, about that, and she had a lot of great insight on that. So to the extent that you're interested in careers, talk with the KU Career Center, see if they can connect you with practitioners in those fields. Or, if you have a professor or someone else you met at an event who does something that's kind of interesting, feel free to reach out to them, expand your network and, see what advice you can get and see what paths open up to you.
All right, thank you all for sharing that information. Now we can dive a little deeper into your careers and particularly the beginnings of them. What challenges did you face the most when starting your career, and how did you overcome them?
So when I started my current position, I had never done a job similar to this or an internship like this or anything. And so when I started with KDOT in August of 2023, I kind of felt like I was drinking from the fire hose a little bit. I just felt like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed by the volume of transportation policy, of Kansas statutes that I now need to understand, of the legislative process, and just understanding the history of a lot of the work that my agency does. And so I think what was most helpful to me was trying to just, anytime I could, set aside some time and just read more about, anything that I felt like I didn't have information about, that I felt a little lost on, because it's totally normal to not have a lot of that information when you start a job, or that's what you're there to do. You're there to gain experience and, learn the job. But I think that it was helpful for me to always seek out what we call subject matter experts at the agency, because I'm not a civic engineer, but I would like to think that I'm partway to that. And so apart from the legislative side of my job, a lot of it was just talking to experts and trying to just soak up everything I could related to the work that I would be able to do, so that I could better kind of talk about things to legislators, to lobbyists, to other stakeholders, just in ways that make sense and can help support making transportation better for the state, which is what I'm here to do. And I think a lot of that boiled down to just being willing to reach out to people, willing to sit in on weird seminars about GIS, anything that felt like I could maybe help me understand the job that I was doing a little better, and just be able to help better explain the work we do to other people.
I would agree with a lot of what you said. I would say the biggest learning curve for me in starting my career was some of that institutional knowledge. I went from having to, write papers about a specific bill, and maybe that was something that I was working on for weeks, to then needing to be able to read this bill, this piece of legislation, and acutely and understand it and clearly communicate to people the governor's stance on it very quickly, multiple times a day with multiple bills, multiple topics. And so I always feel more prepared with something when I know I've spent time with the material, when I've sat down, when I've read the news stories, when I've read all of the information from the memos that I'm given from our government affairs team, when I'm able to, sit down and like hear the governor talk about these things when she's doing an interview with somebody. That really helps me understand the stance. And I agree, we have some subject matter experts in our office as well, and so they're always beneficial to help them understand our stances on things, the ins and outs of the policy and the different statutes and things that we're looking at. Always constantly communicating with my team and leaning on them for support and understanding.
I think one of the most difficult things coming out of law school and then clerking for a couple judges and then actually practicing as an attorney is that you really don't always know what you don't know, especially the first few times you do something, because you've never filed something before, you've never written a certain type of brief before, you've never drafted an opinion before. And so a lot of times you really don't know what you're supposed to do, and you also don't know okay, what should I be asking about? And so the best piece of advice that I have is wherever you're working, find someone whom you can annoy a ton with all your silly questions. That's what I did at the law firm that I was at. There was a senior associate, and if he charged me a fee each time I showed up at his door, he would have been a very rich man, because I would annoy him with all the silly questions. And I do that at my current job as well with one of the deputy solicitor general. So that's my biggest piece of advice is, whether it's a subject matter expert or just someone who's been there longer than you and who knows what's going on, ask them, hey, what should I be doing with this? And then also ask them, hey, we have this coming up. What do I need to know about that? That way you get out in front of your lack of knowledge, you start to prepare, and then whatever happens next is not a surprise to you.
So kind of building on that, what skills or qualities do you find most valuable in your work today?
So in my day-to-day, I think two of the most important skills I can think about are important for my job is listening and communicating. I'm the point of contact for both our state legislators and also the federal delegation. So a lot of my work with them is just really communicating either how KDOT feels about an issue or maybe what we need from a certain legislator to help us with something. And so being able to communicate that to them, especially when you might only have 60 seconds, walking down the stairs with the senator, or being able to, if you're meeting with someone, listen to their needs, kind of listen to maybe what they're telling you without telling you, look at how they react to things. So I think communicating and listening with them is very important. Also in my job, I think public speaking has become more important more quickly than I was maybe expecting. On behalf of the agency, during session especially, we provide a lot of testimony on bills as they might affect us, and so a lot of times I end up giving that testimony in front of legislative committees and answering questions, so it's just become so important to be able to communicate clearly to them and just speak in a way that they will understand as well as constituents, and so that's become really important for me. And the last thing I'll say is organization has become huge. I just get a lot of, our goal is to always help legislators that are helping their constituents or the state. And so they reach out a lot. And it's really important, especially during busy times like session, that we just keep, everything straight, record every inquiry or interaction, because, we never, want to let anything slip because we're here, as public servants, and we want to be good stewards. And so organization has become incredibly helpful in keeping my lists and my charts to make sure that we're always helping people and always, keeping things moving, or if I need to follow up with someone. So I think those are my top skills right now that I'm trying to get better at.
I'm a big proponent of over-communicating. Even if you think that somebody knows something, I think it's best to just, triple check, say it out loud, over-communicate with my team. I also communicate regularly with reporters, and I think that I really pride myself on my relationships with them and that collaboration aspect, even if it's just a casual conversation in the office about something that's completely unrelated to the work that we're doing. Building those personal connections is really beneficial, and maybe later on when you do need something on the professional side, somebody's more willing to help you because you've taken time out of your day to get to know them. I also agree with the organization aspect. I'm a big list maker, even things that don't even necessarily need to be put in a list, it feels really good to cross it off when you get it done. And so I think really collaborating within your team, with everybody, over communicating, all of those things are great foundational skills.
Just like to echo the over-communicating. That is so important. No one is going to call you a pest because you sent an FYI email, just letting your supervisor know what's going on, forwarding things. That is so important so that nothing falls through the cracks, especially in government because people are very busy. They have a lot of stuff going on. And if you can just send them a quick email letting them know what's happened, they might have already known about it, but they might have forgotten. You might give a new perspective on it. No one's ever going to tell you, hey, stop bothering me. I'd also like to recommend that you write things out before you have lengthy conversations with your supervisors or others. Whether or not you actually send them a formal email, it can be very helpful to formulate your thoughts by writing it up in an email or on a notepad, and that way you have a very coherent message and a coherent conversation with them. And writing things out also makes you pause to think over exactly, okay, hey, what is important here? How am I going to phrase this? How is my supervisor or how is my peer going to receive this message? And so it can also help you stay on task more. So I highly recommend, it's a little bit old school, but write out important conversations, write out your points before you go and have conversations with your supervisors.
And practice saying them out loud before you do it. That is so beneficial.
Yes, and not only conversations, but honestly, anything that you write, you should read it out loud. Whether it's a press release, a summary, a draft pleading, a brief. I mean, I will, at work print out like a 90-page brief, and I will read it out loud in my office, and it will take a while. But when you print things out and you read it out loud, you catch so many errors, so many typos. You read things and you hear yourself speaking, you're like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. And it gives you an opportunity to correct it. So definitely, always, if you can, write it out, read it out loud.
And we talked about this a little bit beforehand, but where you work can also shape your career in a lot of different ways. So what would you each say that makes working in Topeka unique?
I think Topeka as a state capital is unique in the sense that it's, kind of a mid-sized city. It's not that big. And, Kansas is close to 3 million people, but that also kind of shapes what our state government looks like. And I think in that regard, I found it to be somewhat of a smaller community just in terms of the people that I interact with on a day-to-day basis. And obviously, I'm just focused on, a certain sect of government policy, unlike, Grace, who has to handle a lot of it, and same with Adam. But I found that it's been very beneficial in terms of building relationships around the State House. You just kind of find the people that you're around over and over, at least in my role, and that's just been helpful in terms of getting to know, who I would go to for, if I had an issue with, the Contractors Association that I had a question for, or if I had a question for, the Kansas airports. So it has become helpful, I think, just that it's not such an overwhelming volume of people to interact with, and it makes it feel like a little bit smaller, a little bit more manageable. And then as far as my agency, I work in a building right across from the State House, so I feel very connected, at least to the legislative side, but also my agency my building is our state headquarters, so it has about 800 employees, so I feel like I can pretty easily get a hold of any subject matter expert for the most part that I need to at any time, and so that's been just really helpful to be in Topeka, where everything's kind of centrally located.
So I work in the State House, and obviously it's a very beautiful building. If you've never been, I highly recommend. There's a lot of history there. Kansas has a very rich history as far as things like women's suffrage, and so I think that makes it really special. But I also agree with what you said about personal relationships. You're kind of in the room where the decisions get made, and that feels really cool to be right in the heart of state government, and I think it's easy to find like-minded individuals when you're working with them on a day-to-day basis, and that helps you form community and make relationships with people outside of work. And so I think that is something that makes Topeka unique.
I agree on that front. It's a lot easier to make relationships, to get to know people, to know how things operate. I work in Memorial Hall, which is right across from the State House. It's a great building. The Attorney General's office is there. And working with a lot of state employees, a lot of them are very dedicated. They have a lot of expertise and very honed knowledge that they developed over years of practice. And I've really been impressed by a lot of the state employees with whom I've worked in terms of their professionalism, their competency, and also just how passionate they are about not only serving the public, but serving Kansas specifically. I mean, there's a lot of state pride in Topeka, which I think is wonderful. You go into state offices of employees, they'll have wheat field pictures on the walls, a lot of Kansas memorabilia, a lot of KU stuff, which I always love to see. And there's a really big sense of pride, I think, among the state employees there, which helps them a lot in terms of performing well and, doing their jobs to the best that they can do.
So we recognize that government or public service careers can be complex. So what are some misconceptions students might have about working in government and public service?
I think that it can sometimes be true that government moves slowly, or at least, can sometimes move slower than industry or, certain parts of the private sector. And I don't know if it's a misconception per se, but I think that what is been important for me to remember as a state employee is that we're public servants, and that, as was mentioned earlier, people can get really busy, and it doesn't mean necessarily that, they don't care about your issue, but a lot of times it's helpful to just, bear in mind that sometimes regulations are in place for a reason, or, if things are moving slowly, it's, likely because people want to get it right. And I think that that's just been a big part of something that I've tried to remind myself of, is that, we're here because we care about our state and we want to make it better. And that no matter if, sometimes things don't go the way we want, or we, feel like they're moving slowly in government for whatever reason, that, the process is in place, and, it's our job to do what we can to make it better and, to help the state. So.
I agree with that. In a similar way, I think nowadays there's a lot of misconceptions about the work ethic of public servants, and I think a lot of those I've found to be really unfair. The people that I work with are some of the hardest working people. They are doing this because they care about our state and they want to make it a better place, and they want, to promote the values that we stand for. And so I think that a lot of times it can be a thankless job. That's not a misconception that I've heard. I think a lot of times it does feel that way, but when you're driven by purpose and you have the belief that you're doing something that's bigger than yourself, I think that that can be also very rewarding.
One thing that was a bit of a misconception to me was just how you get hired into state government. Frankly, as an undergrad and as a law student, it wasn't really clear how you actually got a job working for the state, and my only understanding was generally based off of the federal hiring system, which can take a long time, and there are a lot of hoops that you have to go through to get hired to the federal government. And now that I've gotten into state government, I come to understand that a lot of it is there are certain regulations or other restrictions that can kind of slow down hiring. People are busy. There might only be 1 or 2 HR people for an entire agency, and so it takes a while to go through resumes. Supervisors have briefs to write, and they have to do interviews. And so it is certainly possible to get hired in state government, and it's also possible to get hired as a fairly young individual, as we can show up here. And I do want to say that I think that the state has actually made a better effort in recent years to try and hire more young people, at least in the Attorney General's office. Attorney General Kobach has instituted an honors program, for example, to bring in young attorneys out of law school, and has tried to bring in that fresh energy to the office. And my understanding is that other state agencies are doing that as well. And so to the extent that you are interested in working in public service, you can make it happen. You might have to wait a little bit longer, or be a little bit more persistent, or understand that there are going to be a little bit more hoops to jump through, but understand that you can still make it through the process. You can get hired and you can work for the state, soon out of law school or undergrad.
And you guys have already touched on this a little bit already, but how important has mentorship been in your careers, and how do you recommend someone identifies and builds rapport in a relationship with a good mentor?
Mentorship has been huge. Even before I started my current position, I really felt like at the Dole Institute, I was able to, not even through, guests, but also just through staff members and just other students that were even, older than me, that talking to them was just really helpful to, ease whatever concerns, you might have from time to time about, the job process or, law school admissions or whatever it may be, just to help you navigate it. Because it is hard, especially, as a young, college student or 20-something. I think in my current position, finding mentorship has been extremely helpful in terms of being able to feel more comfortable in the work that I'm doing and more independent. I will also agree that being able to pester people in your office can only be a good thing with your questions to help you just get better at what you are doing, and also just to help you in your career long term. Early in your career is the time to build these good habits and feel comfortable asking questions. And I cannot tell you how hard it feels sometimes, thinking, oh, I don't know the answer to this, but I feel like I should, so I'm not going to ask anyone. And don't, let that moment happen to you, because, the worst thing that someone can do is redirect you to someone else with your question. And so I think mentorship is just really important for being able to help you adjust, and as we kind of talked about earlier, make that transition. And I think you'll find, especially working in public service, that everyone is there, it's what they're wanting. They're wanting to be a servant, a public servant. And those are the type of people that are not going to be, on some crazy career ladder that, they're putting you down to advance their own careers. They're going to be people that genuinely, want to help you advance. And I think that that's just a really great part of being in the career field that we're in, is just, like-minded people that want to help each other.
Mentorship has been foundational for me. I had great mentors while I was here at KU through outside clubs that I was involved in, but some of my best mentors have been people that I've worked directly for and my supervisors, and I agree, ask all the questions. They want they want to be a resource to you, and I really always try to be a sponge and absorb as much information as I can from people. And so I think that mentorship, I think maybe going back to the misconception question too, there's an idea that in public service or in politics, people want to step on each other to get to the top. And I think that I've had the exact opposite experience. I've had so many wonderful people take time out of their days to, sit down and make sure I thoroughly understand something. And that's really been wonderful for my self-confidence and my independence as well. And so I think that mentorship is something that everybody should seek out early in their careers, especially because I still keep in touch with a lot of people who I no longer work with who were amazing mentors to me.
Yeah, mentorship has definitely helped me as well. After law school, I clerked for 2 wonderful judges, both of whom have become lifelong mentors to me. But I want to make an important note on mentorship. It is okay if you feel like you don't have a mentor, or if you feel like you're awful at finding mentors. Like, I am personally awful at that. Like, I was as an undergrad and as a law student. And so I just want to emphasize that a lot of mentorships develop naturally, and that's okay. And it's okay if that happens and you don't think of them as mentor right away. The important thing is that you identify with someone who can assign it. Like, I could ask him for advice like a mentor. He wasn't my assigned mentor, but he served that role because we got to know each other, and that just happened organically. So understand that you don't need to force a mentorship. Sometimes, you send a networking email, it works out great, you get a mentor from the stars, it's all wonderful.
Talk to everyone that you can, get their contact information if you think that something, that they do is really cool. If they work in an area that you want to work, never be afraid to reach out. I know that it feels hard sometimes to, blindly walk up to someone if you're at an event, but that's, the best thing that you can do for yourself a lot of the time, especially if you're already, at a similar, if you're in a similar area, it's, sometimes an easier connection to make than you might think. Like we said earlier, just, I think read and absorb as much as you can. And I think just always be open to, something that you might not think you'd be interested in initially, but, let yourself explore things and don't feel like you have to have it all charted, like you need to have a 5-year plan of I'm going to work at, this place for this long, and then I'm going to go to school for this specific degree with an emphasis on this. Let yourself be open to whatever might change for you. That's kind of what happened to me inadvertently without planning it, and I couldn't be happier that I'm in the position I'm in, and I feel like I have options, and I don't know what I'm going to do in 5 years, and I feel okay with that. So I think just allowing yourself to know that things can go a lot of different ways, and it can be whatever you want it to be without having to have everything figured out to a T.
I would say my advice is kind of twofold, and that's put yourself out there, and you never know if you're going to be able to do something or have an opportunity if you don't ask. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. And it's very difficult to put yourself out there and say, can I come watch you do this? Can I come observe this? Can I join in on this? Can I go do this with you? And I think the answer is automatically no if you don't ask, but that was advice that I was given very early in my career, and so I just started asking to go do everything and saying that this was what I was interested in. And I also think put yourself out there with connections, reach out to anybody. I think it's intimidating, but people are often wanting to serve as a resource to you and wanting to help you grow and become better. And so I think those are two things that I would really emphasize.
I'd say that it's always helpful to look at the careers of people who you admire a lot, see their background, what did they major in, where did they go after law school or, undergrad or whatever their educational path is. How did they get to where they are today? Have they given any advice on their career path? Is that something you might want to follow? It's always okay to kind of have aspirational goals out there that are based off of real people. Google careers that you might be interested in. Look at the people who are in those careers. Is that a path that you might want to follow? That can give you a lot of good insight. And I also do want to emphasize as well, it's also always okay to reach out to those people and ask them, hey, do you have time for a phone call or coffee if you're in town, or just advice over email? You're probably not bothering them. To the extent they don't answer you, it's almost certainly because they are super busy and they just... So, if there's anyone that you want to meet with or talk with, just go ahead and send the email and just say, hey, I'm an undergrad. I'm interested in this about your background. You have 5 minutes for me. And there's a good chance they'll say yes.
All right, thank you so much for those answers. We now can do our student Q&A. If you do have a question, just raise your hand, and then one of our student workers will come to you with a microphone. We have questions if you guys don't have any.
Hi, thank you for your time today. I'm sure being super engaged and involved and wanting to learn everything and help everybody is something that we all can relate to. So my question for you is, how do you kind of figure out your own bandwidth and, use it all without pushing that and feeling kind of burnout? Thank you.
Echoing a little bit of, kind of what Grace touched on earlier, I think really being able to lean on your support system is critical to being able to do that. I think I'll kind of, first, professional bandwidth, lean on, the people that you work with, your supervisor, your colleagues, because those are people that, are going to be able to best understand what, you're maybe working on or trying to accomplish and can be there for you, and then, they might ask you to do the same thing. And so then it becomes, really collaborative, and you maintain a relationship where you feel completely comfortable asking, them to maybe help you with something, or, they might ask you to take something off your plate. On a personal level, I think your personal network and, either friend group or family, it's super important to be able to, come to them when you might feel overwhelmed with work, or, if you need to, you take a day off work, and that's okay too. But being able to recognize your limits is something that is honestly a professional skill, so that you don't end up overworking yourself and getting burnout. And I think that that's what can often be just really helpful in both, facets of your life.
I agree. I think delegating is extremely important. I delegated a task literally today. I was like, I don't have time to go film this video. Can somebody else do this for me, please? I'm running around all day. So I agree that professionally leaning on your colleagues can be extremely beneficial. In my personal life, I do try to take time to decompress. Obviously, in my role, I consume news nonstop all day. That can be very draining and tiring, and so I try to detach from that in the evenings, whether that's, taking time to be by myself, to decompress, to go hang out with my friends, think about things outside of work. Obviously, there's not always a perfect work-life balance, especially in a job like mine or Catherine's or yours, and it's just extremely important to kind of know your limits, know yourself, take time to prioritize the things that matter to you.
When it comes to assignments at work, when it's your first time doing it, it's really helpful to ask a supervisor or a colleague, hey, have we done this before? Do you have a template you can share with me, or a past example? And a lot of times you can kind of reformat that into whatever you're working on, and that can take a lot of stress off of your head because you now understand, okay, this is exactly what they want to see from me. Plus, in a sense, they've already started it for you. Okay, this is like the standard boilerplate language. Now I just have to add some specific language for this assignment at hand. So always ask for examples. Don't reinvent the wheel to the extent you don't have to. You can call it plagiarism or whatever, but that is okay in the professional world, in an office setting. Share work. That's at least a big thing in the law. Reuse other people's work to the extent permissible, and ensure that you are being the most efficient with your time. I'd also say that it's always good to remind yourself that the first time you do something, it is going to be the longest that it's ever going to take you, and to give yourself a little bit of room with that. You're asked to write a press release. The first time it might take you an entire day to write a press release. I don't know, I haven't done it. But it's your first time. But then after that, once you get it, you'll be down to an hour, 30 minutes, et cetera, et cetera. That's how it is for me with briefs. That's how it was for me with opinions. So also understand that, okay, just because it's taking long, if it's your first time and your supervisors know that, they're also not going to be upset with you because they know it is her first time doing this. The next 5 times she does it, she's going to be a whole lot quicker and a whole lot better.
Any other final questions for our panelists before we conclude the discussion tonight? Yeah, Ella in the back.
What's your favorite part about your job?
This sounds a little corny. Well, I'll give a more serious answer and then maybe a more fun answer. I think I love how many different people I get to work with. My job is very external, and so I'm working with so many people across our 2,200 person agency, but also just so many outside from all different facets. I'm talking to people that deal with like passenger rail, or I'm talking to people from other states and on what their states are doing for transportation policy. And so I think that's been the most rewarding thing, is just getting to work across a lot of different areas. I feel like my knowledge is so true to, it's so a mile wide and an inch deep, I think, on so many different issues, and that's just been really exciting because I feel like I've just learned a lot and it's been fun. The other favorite part of my job, I would say, is getting to travel the state for work. And so I've gotten to go to really cool places like Liberal and Hayes and Iowa, and the list goes on. And I say that in jest, but also in seriousness, because we do have such a cool state, and just being able to get to see so much of it for work is honestly just really rewarding.
I'm extremely privileged in the fact that I get to spend a lot of one-on-one time with the governor, and that's very unique. And so I think that is, a personal thing that I don't take lightly, but I take a lot of pride in. But also, I would say my favorite part of my job is when I staff her at external-facing events, and I get to see people's faces light up when they run into her, and I get to hear their stories and their personal lives, and they tell her how that she has impacted their life and things that she's done and how they admire her so much. And I think that is something that's really special, and it's something that I will never take for granted, to see how tangible the things that we do are and really hear from people directly.
I suppose one of my favorite things at work is seeing what you've been working on out in the public. So, if it's a brief or a press release or an attorney general opinion, once it's filed or released or posted on the website, knowing that, you wrote that on behalf of the state of Kansas, and seeing your work out there, that fills me with a lot of pride.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? I think we have one hand right over here.
Hi, thanks again for the advice. It's greatly appreciated. I wanted to ask, was there anything you did as an undergraduate that you felt best prepared you for your jobs in public service, or set you apart as a candidate when looking at law schools or careers in public service, apart from your previously mentioned internships or the SAB, of course?
So in undergrad, I didn't do any internships, and I know that that's maybe becoming less and less common. It's just kind of happenstance with 2020 and all, and later on being able to do a lot with the Dole Institute. I can speak knowing that my references at the Dole Institute directly did result in, helping me get the job that I have now. And so I was extremely fortunate, obviously, to be able to work here for the majority of my time in undergrad and just build those professional connections. I think one of the classes that I took in undergrad in political science, which was political psychology, was actually just, I don't even know if I can say, oh yeah, I psychoanalyze people all the time now for my job, but I feel like that's a job or a class that I think about a lot, even like 4 years after taking it, that just feels so true, and it's always just so interesting being able to see the political process and how people involve themselves in it. And so I just feel like that was kind of a really cool point in my coursework, and I just think a lot about it still.
I also reflect on my coursework a lot. I tried different things, but two of the classes that stand out the most to me are my politics and mass media course that I took, and then a political campaign communications course. I thought those were very beneficial, the most probably practical as far as what I do today. But I was also involved in Greek life. I was in a sorority, and then I got involved in Panhellenic organizations, and so that, I think, was a connection builder for me with other individuals, but it also gave me some experience working in leadership roles that I found to be really beneficial later on.
Yeah, I would say that the most helpful thing for me as an undergraduate was being involved with clubs and organizations where I could be a leader. I was chair of College Republicans. I was in Student Senate. I did things where I had a lot of responsibility, and I learned, how to be competent, how to write, how to communicate with people, how to organize people, how to send a bunch of emails to people. And so, to the extent you can, get leadership positions within organizations that you really care about, because, that really is like working, to the extent that you make it like it, it really is like having an actual job. You have real responsibilities. You can give yourself more responsibilities. You can push yourself. You can grow it as far and as big as you want the organization to grow. And that's really valuable, and those skills will serve you very well in public service or wherever you go for your career.
Okay, thank you so much. We don't have any other questions. That'll conclude our discussion for the night. Huge thank you to our panelists for making the drive out here, especially in this weather. Big round of applause for them. Thank you. That is all for tonight. Thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope you get home safe.